When my daughter's fever hit 104 degrees Fahrenheit, my mother-in-law forced me to stay and cook for visiting relatives. "Give her medicine and stop embarrassing this family," she yelled. When I argued, my husband slapped me so hard I tasted blood. "How dare you talk back to my mother while living under our roof?" Our roof, I almost laughed. They had no idea the mansion and the $10,000 monthly allowance they depended on were both in my name. I picked up my daughter, walked out, and made one phone call that changed everything. The sprawling, 10-bedroom estate nestled high in the Hollywood Hills was humming with the frantic, synchronized energy of an impending high society event. In the grand foyer, caterers in crisp white shirts hurried back and forth carrying silver trays, while florists arranged massive, suffocating displays of imported white orchids. But tucked away in the back wing of the house, inside a dimly lit nursery, the only sound was the shallow, terrifyingly rapid, rattling breath of my 4-year-old daughter, Lily. I knelt beside her small bed, my knees aching against the hardwood floor. I pressed a trembling hand against her flushed, damp forehead. She was radiating heat like an open furnace. The digital thermometer resting on the nightstand flashed a bright, aggressive, terrifying red, 104.2 degrees Fahrenheit. "Mommy, my head hurts," Lily whimpered. Her tiny body shivered violently beneath the damp washcloths I had placed over her skin. Her eyes were glazed over, lacking their usual bright spark. "Did I know, baby? I know. Mommy's got you," I whispered, fighting back the sheer, rising tide of maternal panic. I grabbed my purse from the chair and slung Lily's small pink medical bag over my shoulder. I scooped her up into my arms. She felt dangerously limp, her head lolling against my collarbone. I rushed out of the nursery and into the brightly lit, vaulted marble hallway, almost colliding with my mother-in-law, Agnes. Agnes was wearing a custom, midnight blue silk gown, a string of heavy pearls resting against her collarbone. She was busy inspecting a floral arrangement on a mahogany console table with a critical, aristocratic sneer. "Agnes, Lily is burning up," I gasped, readjusting my grip on my daughter, trying to rush toward the sweeping grand staircase. Her fever spiked past 104. Tylenol isn't bringing it down. She's completely lethargic. "I'm taking her to the emergency room right now." Agnes stepped deliberately into my path. She didn't look at the sick child in my arms. Her face twisted in an expression of profound, unmasked disgust. "You will do no such thing," Evelyn, Agnes commanded, her voice dropping into a harsh, authoritative hiss. "The Vanguard relatives are arriving in less than an hour. You are expected in the kitchen to oversee the 5-course dinner service. I will not have you running off and ruining my evening over a common cold." "It's not a cold, Agnes. She's burning alive. She needs a doctor right now," I pleaded, my voice cracking under the weight of my terror. The heavy oak door of the master's study swung open. My husband, Julian, stepped out. He was adjusting the silver cufflinks of his bespoke tuxedo, his dark hair perfectly styled. He looked at me not with the urgent concern of a father whose child was suffering, but with the profound, exhausting irritation of a king dealing with a hysterical peasant. "Evelyn, stop embarrassing us," Julian sighed loudly, rolling his eyes as he walked toward his mother. "Give her some medicine and put her to bed. You know how important this dinner is for my networking. Uncle Richard is bringing 2 venture capitalists." "Don't be so damn dramatic," I stared at the two of them. For 5 years, I had swallowed my pride. I had played the role of the quiet, subservient, middle-class wife. I had done it because I desperately wanted Lily to grow up in a normal, grounded family, far away from the toxic, transactional, cutthroat nature of the ultra-wealthy world I had been born into. I wanted my husband to feel like a provider. I wanted a simple life. But as I looked at Julian and Agnes standing in a $15 million mansion, wearing clothes funded entirely by the secret $10,000 monthly allowance I funneled into his account through dummy corporations, demanding I risk my child's life to serve them or derves the illusion shattered. "Move out of my way," I said, my voice dropping an octave, stepping forward. Julian's face darkened with a sudden, volatile rage. I had defied an order in front of his mother. He lunged forward, closing the distance between us in a fraction of a second, his hand raising in the air. The slap echoed through the vaulted, marble hallway like a gunshot, the sheer, explosive force of Julian's heavy hand cracking against my jaw snapped my head violently to the side. The momentum sent me stumbling backward. My shoulder slammed hard against the oak wainscoting of the wall, but I tightened my grip on Lily, taking the brunt of the impact so her small body wouldn't hit the wood. A sharp, hot, radiating pain bloomed instantly across my cheek. A second later, the unmistakable, thick, metallic taste of blood flooded my mouth from where my teeth had been driven into my inner lip. Absolute, suffocating silence descended upon the grand foyer. The soft jazz playing through the home's sound system seemed to mock the violence. Agnes stood perfectly still by the floral arrangement. Her hands were calmly clasped in front of her.
She didn't gasp.
She didn't reprimand her son. She simply watched with a sickening, highly satisfied smirk. In her twisted, narcissistic mind, her golden boy had finally put the ungrateful help back in her rightful place. Julian stood over me. His chest was heaving under his tailored tuxedo shirt. His eyes were wide with a manic, fragile dominance. He pointed a trembling, aggressive finger directly at my face. "How dare you?" Julian spat, his voice vibrating with venomous authority. "How dare you talk back to my mother while living under our roof? You will take that child to her room, you will go to the kitchen, and you will do your job. Or so help me God, Evelyn. I will throw you out on the street tonight with absolutely nothing." I stood there, leaning against the wall, holding my burning child against my chest. I slowly raised my free hand, touching my thumb to the corner of my mouth. I pulled it away and looked at the bright, red smear of my own blood on my skin. I looked at the blood. Then I slowly looked up at Julian. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't collapse into a puddle of hysterical, submissive apologies. Instead, a low, dark sound escaped my throat. It bubbled up from the very depths of my chest. It was a genuine, chilling, unhinged laugh. Our roof. He actually believed it was his roof. He truly, genuinely believed that the $15 million estate, the imported cars in the driveway, the bespoke tuxedo on his back, and the life of absolute luxury he paraded around in were the results of his mediocre, mid-level management job at a logistics firm. He was completely, blissfully blind to the complex web of blind trusts and LLCs I had meticulously engineered to subsidize his pathetic, fragile ego for half a decade. The mask of Evelyn the housewife dissolved into the ether, leaving behind something terrifying, ancient, and immensely powerful. The apex predator had awakened. Without saying a single word to the man who had just struck me, without sparing a glance for the mother-in-law who smiled at my abuse, I turned my back. I walked into the nursery, wrapped my feverish, whimpering daughter tightly in a thick blanket, and walked back out. I walked past my stunned husband. My posture was no longer hunched in fear. It radiated a terrifying, lethal authority. "You have absolutely no idea what you've just done," I whispered softly as I passed him, my voice colder than ice. I didn't wait for a response. I walked out the heavy front doors, stepping out into the cold, pouring Los Angeles rain. As I strapped a lethargic Lily into her car seat in the back of my SUV, my hands moving with hyper-focused precision, I pulled out my phone. I didn't call 911. I dialed a private, heavily encrypted satellite number that bypassed Julian's phone plan entirely. It connected directly to the private cell of the senior partner at the most ruthless, formidable wealth management firm on the West Coast. IT rang exactly once before the silence was broken, and the guillotine was officially released. "Dr. Evans is already scrubbed and waiting for you, Miss Sterling," the triage nurse said with profound deference, completely bypassing the crowded, chaotic waiting room of the Cedars-Sinai Emergency Department. Because of who I truly was and the endowment my family had provided to the hospital a decade ago, I was immediately rushed through a set of secure double doors and into a state-of-the-art, soundproofed VIP pediatric ICU suite. Within minutes, Lily was surrounded by the best pediatricians in the state. They worked with quiet, rapid efficiency. And 4-line was established, delivering chilled saline fluids and broad-spectrum antibiotics directly into her tiny veins. I sat in a plush armchair in the corner of the room, my heart in my throat, watching the monitors until her dangerously high heart rate began to slow. "The fever is breaking, Evelyn," Dr. Evans said gently, placing a hand on my shoulder. "It's a severe bacterial infection, but we caught it. She's stabilizing. She just needs to sleep." As Lily's rattling breath finally steadied and she drifted into a deep, safe, medically induced sleep, the suffocating, paralyzing panic of the mother evaporated. What was left behind in the vacuum of that fear was the cold, calculating, merciless mind of a corporate titan. I stepped out of the hospital suite and into the quiet, plushly carpeted private hallway. I tapped the phone icon on my screen. The line connected instantly. Ms. Sterling, a crisp, deeply professional voice answered. It was Arthur Pendleton, the lead manager of the Sterling Family Trust. "Arthur, initiate Protocol 0 on the Hollywood Hills property," I commanded. My voice was entirely devoid of any emotion. It was the voice of a woman ordering an airstrike. Understood. "Shall I begin the asset reclamation?" Arthur asked, the clicking of a keyboard audible in the background. "Yes," I said, wiping a dried speck of blood from my chin. "Freeze the primary joint checking and savings accounts immediately. Cancel every supplementary black card and corporate credit line issued under the names Julian Vance and Agnes Vance. Terminate the $10,000 monthly dummy corporation stipend, effective as of 10 minutes ago." "Done," Arthur confirmed. "And regarding the physical property, ma'am? Contact the property management division. I want an elite eviction team at the estate by 9 p.m. tonight." Julian struck me in the face, Arthur. The typing on the other end of the line stopped dead. A heavy, terrifying silence fell over the phone. "He struck you?" Arthur's voice dropped its professional veneer, replaced by the lethal protective instinct of a man who had served my father before me. "I will have my private security team handle the extraction personally, Ms. Sterling. I will be there myself. They will be removed with nothing but the clothes on their backs." "Thank you, Arthur." 20 miles away, the Hollywood Hills mansion was glowing with warm, golden, inviting light. Julian stood in the center of the grand foyer, holding a crystal glass of expensive scotch. He laughed loudly, a booming, arrogant sound, as he welcomed his wealthy uncle and his venture capitalist cousins at the door. Agnes floated gracefully through the adjacent dining room, her silk dress rustling, accepting lavish compliments on the towering floral arrangements and the mouth-watering smell of the roasting prime rib wafting from the kitchen. "Julian, my boy, this home is simply magnificent," his uncle praised, handing his coat to a hired waiter and clapping Julian heavily on the shoulder. "You've really built an incredible life for yourself. You're a true success story. But where is Evelyn?" "Oh, she took the baby to the doctor." Julian waved his hand dismissively, puffing out his chest inside his bespoke tuxedo. "You know how women get over a little cough. Totally hysterical. I told her to handle it quietly. But please, gentlemen, come into the parlor. Enjoy the vintage champagne. I spared absolutely no expense for tonight." He smiled, raising his glass, a man entirely, blissfully, arrogantly oblivious to the fact that the financial floor had just completely vanished beneath his polished leather shoes. As Julian confidently turned to the head of the elite catering company, casually handing over his sleek, metal black card to settle the massive $15,000 preliminary invoice for the evening's extravagant food and staff, the trap was officially sprung. The catering manager swiped the heavy metal card through his portable terminal. He looked down at the screen, frowned deeply, and swiped it a second time. "I'm terribly sorry, Mr. Vance," the catering manager said, his voice carrying slightly over the soft, ambient jazz playing in the dining room. He tapped the screen of the portable terminal. "The card is declining. It's returning a hard error code indicating the account has been frozen due to suspected fraud. Do you have an alternative method of payment? This is a $15,000 invoice, and my staff requires settlement before the main course is served." Julian went pale. He could feel the eyes of his wealthy uncle and the venture capitalists burning into the back of his neck. The arrogant swagger evaporated instantly. That's impossible," Julian stammered, frantically reaching into his tailored pocket. "It's an unlimited card. It must be a bank error." Here, let me try my personal debit card. He handed over a dark blue card. The manager swiped it. The machine beeped a sharp, aggressive red tone. Declined, sir. Insufficient funds. Agnes rushed over, her silk dress swishing, her face tight with rising panic. Julian, what on earth is going on?
Pay the man.
You're making a scene in front of the Vanguard relatives. Before Julian could even begin to formulate a lie to save his crumbling facade, the heavy, double mahogany front doors of the mansion did not just open. They were shoved inward with a forceful, violent slam that echoed through the entire house. The jazz music seemed to stop. The chatter of the wealthy guests died in their throats. Four massive men in tactical black suits stepped into the foyer. They didn't look like police. They moved with the cold, lethal efficiency of a private, highly paid paramilitary force. Following them was Arthur Pendleton, wearing a sharp gray suit and holding a thick, leather briefcase. And then, stepping through the doorway from the rainy Los Angeles night, came me. I wasn't wearing the stained, oversized clothes of the terrified, shrinking housewife they had abused hours ago. I wore a sharp, tailored black trench coat, belted tightly at the waist. My hair was pulled back into a severe knot. I stood perfectly straight, my posture commanding the absolute gravity of the room. The dark, purple bruise blossoming on my jawline was clearly visible under the chandelier light, a stark, undeniable testament to his crime. Evelyn, what the hell is this? Julian roared, attempting to regain his dominance, puffing his chest out in front of his family. He took a step toward me. Who are these men? Tell them to get out of my house right now. Two of the tactical guards instantly stepped in front of me, placing their hands firmly on Julian's chest and shoving him backwards so hard he stumbled over a Persian rug. I stopped in the dead center of the foyer. I looked at the catered food, the shocked, whispering relatives, the terrified caterer, and finally, my pathetic husband. Pay the caterer, Arthur, I commanded, my voice smooth and loud enough for everyone to hear. Arthur reached into his breast pocket and handed the bewildered catering manager a certified cashier's check. I turned my dark, cold eyes back to Julian. This isn't your house, Julian, I said softly. It never was. Arthur stepped forward. He unlatched the leather briefcase and held up a heavily stamped, certified legal deed. This property is owned outright by Vanguard Holding LLC, a direct subsidiary of the Sterling Family Trust, Arthur announced, his voice carrying the weight of absolute legal doom. The sole owner and beneficiary of that trust is Ms. Evelyn Sterling. Julian Vance, you and your mother have been residing here under the grace of an informal, undocumented tenancy. A tenancy entirely funded by Ms. Sterling's $10,000 monthly charity allowance. A collective, horrified gasp erupted from the wealthy relatives. The uncle who had just praised Julian's success stared at him in utter disgust. Agnes clutched her pearl necklace, gasping for air as the color completely, violently drained from her aristocratic face. Her entire social reality had just been publicly incinerated. You hit me, Julian. My voice dropped to a lethal, quiet register that silenced the entire room. I pointed to the bruise on my face. You hit me because my daughter was sick and you thought I had nowhere to go. You told me I lived under your roof. You thought you owned the cage, but I took one step closer, looking deep into his terrified, uncomprehending eyes. But I built the cage, Julian. And as of 10 seconds ago, your tenancy is permanently revoked. Julian's mind snapped. The total loss of his ego, his money, and his reputation in front of his family broke him. He let out a feral, pathetic scream and lunged forward in a blind rage, raising his fists. He never even made it within 3 feet of me. The 2 private security guards effortlessly intercepted him. They grabbed him by the arms, twisting them painfully behind his back, lifting his expensive Italian shoes entirely off the floor. They marched him swiftly to the front doors and violently threw him out into the pouring, freezing rain. He landed hard on the wet concrete of the driveway. Agnes shrieked, running toward the door, but Arthur Pendleton simply pointed a stern finger at the exit. You're next, madam. Walk out, or you will be carried. As Agnes stumbled out into the rain, clutching her ruined silk dress, Weeping hysterically next to her ruined son, I signaled a guard to shut the heavy oak doors, permanently sealing the parasites outside the fortress they had tried to claim. 2 weeks later, the spectacular, absolute collapse of Julian Vance was complete. Through Arthur's meticulous tracking, I knew exactly where my abusers had landed. Julian was currently sitting on the edge of a stained, sagging mattress in a $40 a night motel room located off a grimy interstate off-ramp. His wealthy relatives, utterly disgusted by the public revelation of his domestic abuse and his pathetic financial parasitism, had blocked his number entirely. He was facing a severe criminal assault charge filed by my legal team and a devastating, one-sided divorce proceeding where he possessed zero financial leverage, zero money to hire competent counsel, and absolutely zero claim to Lily. In the corner of that dingy motel room, Agnes wept bitterly day and night. The toxic, enabling mother-son bond had finally devoured itself. She spent her hours screaming at Julian, blaming him for ruining everything, for losing their golden goose because he couldn't control his temper. They were trapped in a claustrophobic, miserable hell of their own creation. Miles away, the reality was vastly, beautifully different. The morning sun poured through the massive, spotless bay windows of the Hollywood Hills estate. The house was incredibly quiet, save for the soft, melodic sound of cartoons playing on the television in the living room. Lily sat on the thick, plush rug. Her fever was a distant memory. She was fully recovered, her bright, intelligent eyes tracking the animated screen as she happily played with a set of wooden building blocks. I sat on the white linen sofa, sipping a mug of hot, premium coffee. I wore comfortable, flowing silk loungewear. I didn't feel the need to perform. I didn't feel the crushing anxiety of trying to shrink my presence to fit someone else's fragile ego. I radiated a profound, untouchable peace. Resting on the glass coffee table in front of me was a thick manila envelope containing the final, court-approved emergency restraining order and the initial, ironclad divorce filings. I had officially dropped the Vance surname. The legal paperwork to change Lily's name was already processing. We were Sterlings again. I looked across the room, my eyes settling on the exact spot in the grand hallway where Julian had struck me. For 5 years, I used to look at that hallway and feel a phantom, suffocating weight of anxiety pressing down on my chest, constantly wondering how to appease them, how to maintain the illusion of a normal family for Lily's sake. Now, I looked at that exact same spot on the hardwood floor and saw a boundary line. The slap hadn't broken me. It hadn't instilled fear. It had simply handed me the exact, heavy sledgehammer I needed to finally shatter my own pathetic illusions. I had wanted a normal, middle-class family for Lily so badly that I had blinded myself to the monsters living in my house. But sitting in the sunlit room, watching my daughter laugh at the television, I realized the ultimate truth. Safety, authenticity, and fierce, unconditional love were infinitely more valuable than a fake, abusive normal. As I leaned forward, setting my coffee mug down to join Lily on the rug, my encrypted phone buzzed on the table. It was a brief email from Arthur Pendleton at the legal team. Ms. Sterling, Julian Vance's countersuit for spousal support and alimony has just been thrown out of court by the judge with extreme prejudice. He is legally prohibited from contacting you again. I read the words, felt absolutely nothing for the man in the motel, deleted the email, and kissed my daughter on the forehead. 3 years later, the grand, vaulted ballroom of the Sterling Foundation Gala offered a breathtaking, panoramic view of the glittering, sprawling Los Angeles skyline. I stood at the crystal podium, illuminated by the flash of a dozen press cameras. I was wearing a breathtaking, custom-designed emerald green gown that caught the light with every movement. I was concluding a passionate, 30-minute keynote address that had just successfully raised over $10 million to fund a network of high-security shelters and legal aid clinics for survivors of domestic violence. I was no longer the quiet, anxious servant wife hiding in the shadows of my own home. I was openly managing my family's empire. I was one of the most powerful, respected, and feared philanthropists and corporate executives on the West Coast. As I delivered my final, empowering remark, the crowd of dignitaries, politicians, and business leaders erupted into a thunderous, standing ovation. Suddenly, from the side stage, a bright, energetic 7-year-old girl bolted past the security guards. Lily, wearing a beautiful little silver dress, laughed brightly and threw her arms around my waist. "You did great, Mommy." Lily beamed, looking up at me with eyes full of absolute adoration and security. I smiled, the formidable CEO vanishing instantly. I crouched down to hug my daughter tightly, my heart completely full. "Thank you, my brave girl. I did it for you." Earlier that week, Arthur Pendleton had flagged a minor incident in my weekly security briefing. Julian had been spotted working as a valet at a mid-tier restaurant downtown. The security photos showed a man who looked aged, exhausted, and utterly broken, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He had recognized one of my junior executives arriving for dinner and had desperately tried to ask for a message to be passed along to me, begging for forgiveness. I had read the security report, nodded once to acknowledge the information, and dropped the paper directly into the industrial shredder beside my desk. He was nothing to me, a pathetic ghost, a harsh lesson learned in a previous lifetime. I lifted Lily into my arms, balancing her easily on my hip, and walked away from the podium toward the massive, floor-to-ceiling windows. We looked down together at the bustling, electric city far below us. They had tried to break me. They had tried to sacrifice my daughter's life for the sake of a superficial dinner party. They had expected me to cower in fear under the threat of homelessness. "Look at all those lights, Lily," I said softly, pressing a kiss to her temple, feeling the immense, unshakable power of my own sovereignty. "Are they all ours, Mommy?" Lily asked innocently, tracing a finger against the thick glass. I laughed. It was a rich, unburdened, beautiful sound that filled the room. "No, sweetheart," I replied, holding her close. "We don't own all the lights, but the absolute freedom to look at them without fear, the power to stand in the light and never let anyone put us in the dark again, that belongs entirely to us." I looked out at the infinite horizon, my fortress completely impenetrable. They had told me I was living under their roof. They were right to assume the house was a cage. But they forgot one fundamental rule of power. The landlord can always choose to demolish the building. And from the ashes of that burning cage, I had built an empire. As I turned away from the window, carrying my daughter confidently back into the glittering ballroom amidst their applause, I knew with absolute, terrifying certainty that no one in this world would ever dare raise a hand to me or my child, ever again. If you want more stories like this, or if you'd like to share your thoughts about what you would have done in my situation, I'd love to hear from you. Your perspective helps these stories reach more people, so don't be shy about commenting or sharing.